At the end of Season 3, Fu got himself trapped. Shadow Flop was about to attack him and Ladybug and Chat Noir had to deal with a crazy-ass Chloe. What's the best way to handle the situation on his part? Throw Marinette to the wolves. And he did. He renounced the box and made her guardian. And lost his memories along with it. Or did he? Or was it all an act so he can run away from his responsibilities like he always has? This is something I've had in mind for a while now and I've been waiting for someone else to say it but nobody ever did. What made me come up with this theory? In short, Fu's awful acting, the holes in his series of rules and Suhan having passed to role to Fu but still having his memories. It's important to give you proper context when it comes to the Order of the Guardians and all that lore. Sadly not much has been explained or confirmed and I don't wanna go off of other theories so I'll base my points on what has already been said in the show. We don't have the clearest picture of what the timeline looks like and all the Guardians throughout the years but to my understanding Suhan was the first Guardian of the box. Then again we can't be too sure because in Furious Fu the Quamis confirm that Suhan is the Celestial Guardian and later on Marinette recalls what the Quamis said and calls him the real original Guardian. Does that mean he's the first one? Were there others before him? How long did they have this Guardian training system at the temple for before it burnt down? None of this is ever explained. So unless they confirm that there was another Guardian before Suhan, I'll assume he was the first one to have that role. Then we move on to Fu who was chosen to be trained as Guardian. Then we have the feast incident. When he explains this he said he was training to be Guardian and was made to watch over the box for 24 hours or whatever. Does this mean he wasn't Guardian yet? Was Suhan still the Guardian when this happened? It wouldn't make sense for him to officially be the Guardian but still be in training, right? Believe it or not I did some research for this video instead of going off of memory which is big for me, and I left with more questions than answers. My biggest mistake was going back on the MLB subreddit and expecting answers. I'll share some of the responses I got that didn't help at all and hopefully this convinces you to never ask anything on there. I was wondering why Suhan didn't lose his memories after making Fu the Guardian like Fu lost his when he made Marinette the Guardian. Someone told me that's because Suhan was a different kind of Guardian or some shit. Someone else said while Suhan never renounced being a Guardian he wasn't around to be one and that Master Fu was the only one available to have the box until he made Marinette the Guardian. If Suhan didn't renounce being Guardian how did Fu get that role? Aren't you magically trapped in this role once it's been passed on to you? This would mean that Suhan is still the Guardian and not Marinette. Or Fu in the first place. But then how did Fu pass the role on to her if it was never passed on to him? Another response was this. It is obvious that Fu used a specific spell, to be used only in the event of facing capture by your enemies. Other handover spells obviously exist that do not erase the memory and still others to erase the memory of a Guardian who has been disciplined and dismissed. That's not what happened in this scene. There was no spell, he just renounced his role and passed it to Marinette so they couldn't attack him since he wouldn't have it anymore. That's it. This is something you pulled out of your ass clearly because nobody mentioned any kind of special spells for a situation like this, so I'm not buying it. Somebody else said you lose Guardian status upon death. Fu is alive and he's no longer Guardian so no the hell you don't. Another one says renouncing something seems to be of importance. Marinette never renounced any of the Quamis as a holder, and thus they cannot give her name to Gabriel. Still, they can have other holders. Maybe passing something on is the norm rather than renouncing it? And the memory loss thing is for instances where a Guardian wishes to cut ties with the Order? There's a lot to unpack here. Gabby and Marinette's situation is not the same as Suhan and Fu. Gabby had the Quamis but he wasn't the Guardian so they don't have to obey him. She didn't renounce the role so he can't have control over them the way a Guardian could. If you're passing something on to someone aren't you basically letting go of that? But that logic Suhan doesn't have the Guardian title anymore since he gave it to Fu. And the last one is what I wanted to bring up about Fu and wanting to run away from responsibility thus wanting to cut ties with the Order. They've never said anything about Guardians being able to cut ties just like that. It almost seems like Fu in the centuries of being with the Quamis has made up his own rules like Suhan said and convinced the Quamis that these rules were in some book. So the Quamis went along with them. Why else would he be the only one who apparently lost his memories after passing the Guardian role to someone else? It's almost like he made that rule up. Go back to Furious Fu. Suhan never admits to this rule being true and he looks confused for the most part. After his akumatization he gives Fu his cane back and he looks like he wants nothing to do with this mess anymore. So he lies about thinking Fu was someone else. And Fu says, it's already been forgotten. Double meaning? When he woke up after making Ladybug guardian, he said such pretty costumes and asked who Ladybug and Chat Noir were since they were the only ones around. The first two people he saw, Chat Noir asks if he's lost his memory and the turtle Kwame says it's the rule of the guardians to lose their memories after they pass on the box to protect the secret identities of the miraculous holders. Ladybug tells him they're friends and his response is, "Nice to meet you." Ladybug does her miraculous Ladybug ritual and he still doesn't remember them. He says this is the first time he's laid eyes on them. Sure. And he tells Ladybug he could have used the keychain she threw away and that it was matching with his. So he remembers he had a keychain and what it looked like somehow? Something's not adding up. Apparently Fu was planning this for a while and even wrote a letter for Marinette to read after he quote-unquote lost his memories. In the letter he philosophically manipulates her to accept change. In other words, suck it up and accept the guardian role. That was my interpretation of it. We don't see where he goes immediately after this, but it cuts to Marinette reading the letter and walking to the station with Fu. Lost all his memories except those of how trains work? Okay. And not the only memory he didn't lose it seems. Because when they get to the station this old lady pops out of nowhere and he says this bullshit.
It's incredible. I've only just met you and yet my heart is beating as if I've known you forever.
You should always trust your heart.
If this theory ends up being wrong, just know I don't mean to bash the script writers or the voice actor, but the way these lines were written and delivered is almost like he's putting on an act. Like the first time I watched this scene I was genuinely wondering if he was acting. C could just be the VA's voice and if it is again I don't mean to insult him, but I can't help but feel like I'm being fooled here. Even Lila is a better actress than this guy. It sounds like he's acting very badly, and this woman just goes with it? What? How the hell does this work? Cartoon logic? At first I thought, maybe she remembered him from when they were young? But that doesn't work since he presumably lost all his memories from when he was guardian. So since he was 8 or 10? Younger than Marinette like he said. But he was at the temple and there is no way this lady was at the temple. And this was centuries ago so there's no way she remembers him from any interaction back then. Wait, if he's centuries of years old how the hell is she alive? I understand how he's still alive. Probably fuel from the miraculouses and shit and all those time situations. But how old is this woman? How does he somehow remember her? Fishy as hell. It's like he planned this. To leave everything behind and get with some bitch and fuck off to another country. Honestly relatable. But the way he delivered these lines to her is almost comical to me. And Marinette just accepts this. Then he says to Marinette he'll never forget her. Double meaning? As in I haven't forgotten you and I never will? Next time they see each other is in Furious Fu. She goes back to the train station and Marianne says this.
Do you remember her, my love? She's the young girl who found you after your paddleboat accident. The accident that caused your amnesia.
So let's unwrap this little by little because there's a lot right here. Marianne tells Fu Marinette was the one who found him after his paddleboat accident that caused him to lose his memories. Did Marinette tell her this? Did she tell that to Fu? Did he make this up? It's never made clear to the viewers and we don't see Marinette's reaction to this information. Is that how she excused his amnesia? There's no proof of any paddleboat accident that he was part of. Does nobody question this? Fu also thanks her for reuniting him with the old lady, but she didn't reunite him with anyone. She just happened to be there and he went I don't know you but I feel like I've known you my whole life and she just went along for some old man dick. But sure. Marianne reveals he discovered a passion for painting and he gives Marinette a painting that seemed very suspicious to me. He claims he doesn't know what it's supposed to represent and that when he thinks of her this is what he sees. The painting is basically a mess of strokes. A mess is what he sees when he thinks of her? I found this odd. It's like he acknowledges that he's made her a mess after making her the guardian. Almost mocking her in a way. She doesn't know how the hell to react understandably but she makes herself like it anyway. This painting was never brought up again after this episode so I'm assuming she threw it away. Shit, that's what I would do. He's as bad a painter as he was a guardian. I feel like such a gift would be more prominent in the show from that point on but it's not. Did they forget about it? Back to the bench scene. After he gives her the painting the turtle Kwame comes out of the bag and tries to go to Fu. He picks him up from the floor and says that's such a cute little doll and asks if it's hers. It still feels like he's mocking the viewers. Like he's telling us he hasn't forgotten shit without actually telling us. His tone is so suspicious to me. Marinette clears any suspicion that this is anything more than a plushie that talks and changes the subject. If I'm right and this man really is lying about losing his memories, that makes this moment so much more infuriating. Living with the knowledge that you ruined a kid's life for no reason. Because yours was? You didn't ask for Thc, but she didn't either. She didn't ask to be guardian, let alone have a miraculous. Giving her a painting to represent what a mess she's become is crazy. I haven't seen any people's interpretations of the painting, so I might post about it on the subreddit and make another video with more theories on what it could represent. When Marinette goes back home, she sees Suhan right there in her room. Creepy ads bitch. He tells her Fu is incompetent and that she's broken many rules of a guardian. He pulls out a manual and starts reading some to her. Like Kwamis not being allowed to roam outside the box, guardians not losing miraculouses and guardians not wearing miraculouses. He's just as incompetent as Fu, and these are the only rules he tells her instead of teaching her all of them with genuine explanations as to how they could harm her guardianship, if these rules even matter. Suhan seems to know all about guardians' rules, but he never says anything when it comes to the rule Waze talks about. Neither the rule Fu got in their heads about not revealing their identities to each other no matter what, always convincing them of the dangers of doing so and never the dangers of not revealing their identities. This is the reason behind their miscommunication through the seasons, and it's all because of some unheard of rule Fu came up with. To add to my point of him making rules up to make things harder for them and easier of him to get away, look at the New York special. The heroes there can reveal their identities to each other and there's no problem. If anything, it makes their connection as heroes stronger. Unless they're inexperienced kids or kids who happen to know each other without the mask and have feelings for each other with it, known as the love square. And Reunion confirmed that this isn't the first case of the Ladybug and Black Cat miraculous owners falling for each other, which further proves my point that he wanted to make it as hard as possible for these two when he specifically chose the Ladybug and Cat miraculouses when he could have chosen any other set. And hormonal kids of all people, knowing they're quote-unquote made for each other. If they're not meant to reveal their identities but they're made for each other, how would that work out? He's contradicting himself. So I was right. He really does want to make their lives harder. And he succeeded. Chat Noir made a really good question in Furious Fu that isn't talked about enough. When Suhan asked her to renounce the box and give it back to him, Chat Noir asked if she'd forget him by doing that along with all her memories, like we're meant to believe Master Fu lost his. By that point, she'd only been the guardian for a day or a few days, right? So shouldn't she only lose her memories from her time as guardian? Why would she lose all her memories that he's ever had? Seems like a dumb rule and an unnecessarily cruel one at that, because it's a waste of life. For her, not a long one. But if Fu really did lose all his memories, why did he selectively remember Marianne and the fact that he had a keychain? It all seemed like a performance to me because of the lack of explanation behind this rule and what memories they're supposed to lose. Wouldn't he be having an existential crisis if he lost quite literally all his memories? So if he only lost his memories from his time as guardian, since he was like 8 or 10, I guess he still wouldn't remember shit because that was centuries ago. Not even vampires can look back centuries ago to when they were 8 years old, so I don't see how he could remember. But for Marinette it's different since she's only been guardian for a few hours. So technically if she renounced it, she shouldn't lose many memories. Only what happened after Fu passed the box to her. How the hell would losing all your memories help protect the miraculous holders' identities? That doesn't even correlate to the miraculous holders. That's not a problem with Suhan since he's not going around telling motherfuckers anyone's identity. Again, he states that this rule isn't even a thing. Remember this, Fu has a history of making up his own rules. So me saying the memory loss thing was a lie isn't really far-fetched. It sucks that Chat Noir's question never got an answer from the writers. Another thing, when Suhan tells Marinette about these rules he mentions the staff he got. And the staff Fu got. Why didn't she get a staff? Another good question. Shouldn't she magically be gifted a staff from the Kwamis or something? Or is that something the monks used to give the guardian? Anyways, like I said, the history of the guardians is so foggy and poorly explained it's hard for me to give context for the memory loss rule and how that's affected other guardians who passed on the box to the next guardian. My questions haven't been answered and I have yet to understand how Suhan still has the guardian role even after he passed the role to Fu without losing his memories. The only logical answer I can think of is that there is no memory loss rule and that Fu lied. Again, it's not as far-fetched as it may sound at first. Even without all the evidence I brought up, he's been doing this for centuries even though he's been sitting on his dick most of the time. He still has to deal with the pressure of his mistake, and it's normal that he'd want to run away from it like he's been doing. He found Marinette and Adrian just in time somehow before Gabby's first attack and knew they were made for each other, which, even though may just sound like a shipper, makes me think he's a psychic. Because remember that Gabby has had the butterfly miraculous for like 14 or 15 years, and could have attacked a long time ago, but somehow he knew just when to leave them the miraculouses. He latched onto these kids and saw them as tools he could use to run away from his mistakes so they can fix them for him. Meanwhile, he has barely made any efforts to train them, especially the one with the most dangerous miraculous chat noir. They have 1 or 2 short interactions as themselves, and one when Fu sneaked into Adrian's boys-only party as comic relief. This man is pathetic and a fucking coward. Yes, he was forced to leave his family behind and they fucked up his childhood and his entire life. But that doesn't mean he should continue this curse and make another child go through it. He shouldn't be choosing children for this to begin with, and Suhan was right. If he wasn't lying and he really did lose all his memories and knowingly made Marinette be the next one to lose hers, I have to say this. If he was lying about the memory loss and scared both her and Chat Noir and unknowingly everyone else in Marinette's life, I have to say this. If this gets brought up next season and I end up being correct, all of you owe me your money. Said it before, I'll say it again. Master Fu was a whiny man-child who never owned up to his responsibilities. He completely neglected one child while severely underpreparing the other, and when the time came, he bailed like a coward and gave a 14-year an existential crisis. I sympathize with what he went through as a child. Yes, Suhan treated him like shit even if he had some good points. Yes, they starved him to the point where his anger took over and destroyed everything. That really wasn't entirely his fault, but the fellas training him. Suhan? Was he the one training him as his apprentice? Don't know. Twitter girlies have fasted for way longer period. If they were there, he would have lasted not just 24 hours. They would have motivated his ass to starve for even longer. Am I going to get cancelled for this? Probably. That was a silly dark joke, thank you. Don't unsubscribe, I take it back. But what he did to these children makes me not sympathize with him. He knows how bad it was for himself. But for some reason he wants history to repeat itself with children guardians fucking everything up. He proceeded to make 2 children do the dirty work for him. One which he utterly neglected and the other which he poorly trained and threw to the wolves when he got in trouble. Is she supposed to fix his mistakes? Is that all Marinette is to him? A tool to fix his shit and take on his responsibility? Conclusion. Learn from Marinette's mistakes and don't be nice to old men. Break their kneecaps instead. That way they won't give you a magical object of mass destruction that will ruin your life and then give you an even bigger responsibility that will make you a shell of yourself once you've accepted your fate. That's the true lesson MLB teaches you. These fucks ultimately destroyed Marinette's life and she never asked for this shit. That's sadly how the chain works. They trained Suhan poorly, so Suhan trained Fu poorly, and Fu trained Marinette poorly. Will she train her apprentice poorly? Will she lose her memories, or will we find out it was a fraud? We shall see. Whether he lied about the memory rule or not. Tell me what you think, baby girls. Thanks for watching. Fuck Master Fu and Suhan.
Oh my god, yes, I'm not